Khalid.
Yes, this is Khalid. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We are waiting for the others, so.
Hello, this is Bassem here.
Hello, everybody from Italy.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome,
Hello.
guys.
Thank you.
Will there be a video of this meeting or some kind of recording?
We will discuss this after, so let's just wait for the others to join.
Okay.
Please,
Yeah,
you can
Thomas.
also disable your mic, Thomas, and then.
So we will record this meeting, Thomas. So and we will send the presentations afterwards to your email address. So
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Abdel.
Hey, Mr. Kort, how are you?
Good. There's Marius, there's Adrian. More people I don't know. I don't know Khaled. Who else?
Those are our guests, actually.
Wonderful. And we're going to have more guests. That's great. I think I'm the only person on this call for whom it is morning.
Oh,
Hi, Inez.
hi God. How are you? Good to
I'm
see
good.
you.
Good to see you too.
Good to see you too.
Um,
everybody.
can I ask for the people who are not speaking who muted to mute their microphone, please? Because if we have 70 people in the webinar, it's going to be the big mess as everybody starts shouting.
Sorry, Ronnie, I won't talk to anyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
So afterwards, we're going to ask some improvement suggestions. And I was just thinking of adding music before we start, so that can be a nice one. Or otherwise, we have to vote that Ronnie will sing a song. And I think this will be also a good suggestion, no?
I have concerns about the process we follow to select the music. I think we need to form a subcommittee.
I hear you coming.
I would like to lead that subcommittee.
Okay, great to see you, Ronnie.
All right, good work. Ronnie, I see your comment. So when people want to ask questions, they just click that chat button and send in those questions, and then you'll bring some of those to us at the end. Is that right?
Yes, but when we start in, let's say, 1 minute, I will explain the rules of the game.
No doubt we all will comply.
Okay, guys, it's exactly 3 o'clock, so I think it's a great time to start this webinar. Very warm welcome at this first Fall Creek webinar. So my name is Ronnie Kersten. I'm the Key Account Manager for Fall Creek in EMEA, and I'm your host today, so I make sure this webinar is going smooth. Today's speakers are Hans Liekens, is Commercial Manager in Europe, and Cord Brazelton, he's the co-CEO of the company. So the topic of today is blueberries during and after COVID-19, opportunities created by this pandemic for new players in Central Asia, Middle East, and Northern Africa. So we are very fortunate to have many people representing 23 countries attending this webinar. It's not necessary to make pictures of the presentation, so we will send the handouts afterwards. Please be aware that we are recording this webinar. The usage of your camera is not necessary. As we're all having a tight schedule, I propose to start with the agenda of this webinar. So introduction I will do shortly. Then we have the global interest in blueberries presented by Cord. Hans will explain more about the blueberry consumption in EMEA. Then we talk about health research in blueberries by Cord Brazelton. And the EMEA retail reaction on product price and volumes by Hans Liekens. And afterwards we can have a discussion. Now first I want to explain you a few house rules to make this easy and smooth. Mute your microphone, please. So everybody is muted. On the left side, you put it on mute. If you have questions, send a chat. There's a chat function in the bar below. Questions will be answered after the presentations. And if you want to ask a question, click on chat below in your screen. How asking questions? Type the question you want to ask after the presentations. I will ask some questions to the other speakers. Unanswered questions we will answer afterwards in a private conversation. Speaker view. Well, this was the best picture of Hans we could find. So please click on speaker view. Now you can see the speaker during the presentation. And that's it. And now I'm going to give the floor to Cord Brazelton.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon to you, and good morning from the Western United States in the quarantine in the state of Oregon. I like to open our presentations at Fall Creek with our mission. So Ronnie, go ahead, go to that next slide. I'm sure some of you have already seen this, but the mission and also the purpose, what we do and why we do it is summarized in this statement. Fall Creek's mission is to build a world with better blueberries through exceptional plants, relationships, innovation, and customer success. This is what we do, why we do it, and also how we make decisions in a purposeful way as we seek to serve our customers. So I was tasked, if you go to the next slide, Ronnie, with briefly presenting a global update. The fact is, today we all live in much more local realities than we used to. I feel more connected to what's happening in the United States, for good and bad, today than I think I have in the last few years because I'm not traveling as much. So actually, Hans is going to talk a lot about what's happening in the European market. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about the US as a trend example of what's going on in that final B2C market, the retail to consumer market in blueberries and in the broader category. And then I'll also talk about some of the broader global trends. But very briefly, what you see here is from Nielsen data. Nielsen, similar to Kantar in Europe, collects about 70% of retail data. Important to note that Costco, which is a box store, a club store in the United States that has a few outlets in Europe and in the UK, is the largest handler of blueberries and also presents in many cases the best returns to growers. So this data is not comprehensive, but it's still important because it represents 70% of traditional retailers. We break our categories down into 4 segments: fresh conventional, fresh organic, and frozen conventional, frozen organic. As you can see here, the actual value growth in the category as well as volume through the year has been massive in actual utilization and also category value. There are distortions here because the fact is, if you were a grower or an operator during particularly the month of March in Mexico, the United States, during that season, you had a very disrupted reality. You were reduced to 50% capacity on buses, labor issues. In fact, there were a lot of issues for a period of time with truckloads of all sorts of perishables arriving to central distribution centers in the US and not being able to unload because the distribution centers for the retailers were literally filled with toilet paper during the panic buying period in the United States. So toilet paper won and fresh berries lost for a little bit because stores had all of the center of their store, the dry goods and toilet paper, things like that, disappear. And they had a difficult supply chain issue. As we work through that supply chain issue in recent weeks, blueberries have now outperformed other berries, and produce in general has seen a strong recovery. Blueberries and citrus specifically have stood out and looked very good. The frozen growth is staggering. That's not just a result of panic buying, but frozen consumption is significantly up. Consumers seem, and this is also happening in Europe and the UK, seem to be discovering that frozen blueberries are actually quite convenient, and they're seeming to increase share of stomach. So in addition to increases in fresh consumption, we're seeing a lot of growth in frozen. Note that a lot of the category value growth in blueberries, value growth at retail, is not just a byproduct of volume increase. Some of it occurred even with decreased volumes for a period of time because pricing at retail remained high because retailers were not able to move to merchandising and SKU changes. So that doesn't mean this has been perfect, but the category hasn't crashed, it's still grown, albeit in a very disrupted and dysfunctional way. Now, and looking forward, blueberries are actually looking quite healthy, promotions are underway, pricing is more stable, and it looks like one of the winners. This is a quick summary of some of that same data. In general, the year's total volume in fresh and frozen relative to last year in the United States and 70% of retail, so most retail in the US, is up almost 25%. It's up 24% year on year. Organics are a big standout for value and volume growth, and the total category value is up 17%. That lack of SKU shift, so moving from small packages to more value packs that are also more efficient for growers, didn't happen as it usually does. And so some of that lower category value growth and return to producer is a result of the panic and the disrupted period in March. April's actually been quite healthy. Broader trend, blueberries are a product people want to buy, and actually there's some new health research and some encouraging health information that's coming out that's helping reinforce this. So no product in perishables had an easy time during COVID-19's initial outbreak during the pandemic, but blueberries did do uniquely well. And now looking forward, it's quite positive. The challenge remains not at the demand level of consumers, but at coordinating the supply chain. And the hard thing now for any business, this is us as we try to transplant plants, this is all of you in your businesses as you try to operate. None of us are looking at the same operating reality. It's as simple as that. We have to learn to operate while keeping our people and our communities safe and get ever better at that. So the last one is a more global trend. I don't have all these trends to show you as comparisons, but this is interesting. Shortly after the pandemic outbreak, you see there in 2020, and we shared this on our LinkedIn profile at the company as well, interest in blueberries and Google searches in blueberries skyrocketed to an all-time high for that time of year. As a point of reference, we looked at other produce items, and in a few cases, especially avocados and citrus, it's similar. In more standard items, it has decreased. People are sitting at home where they're searching more things, but blueberries are a unique standout. There's been a relative increase substantially in people's Google searches for blueberries, including health research, but also recipes, ways to eat fresh and ways to eat frozen. If you want to dive into it, you can find that in Google Analytics, and it's interesting to see what consumers are thinking about as it pertains to blueberries all around the world. So I will stop there, and this moves to Mr. Hans Leekens.
Hi. I'm going to talk about the blueberry consumption before and during COVID. Next one. So what we knew already is that the consumption in Europe increased between 2016 and 2018 with 23% in Europe. With an average, coming close to an average consumption of 250 grams per capita in Europe. Biggest country in Europe in consumption is still the UK, and also they had a steep growth of 5% penetration, resulting in more than 1 kilo per capita consumption in 2018. Based on that, we see and we assume that the growth of the actual volume we consume with Europe together, 119,000 tons, that it will grow to 650,000 tons. So the 190,000 tons is the equivalent of what we are eating today. If we grow to 650,000 tons, we eat 860 grams per capita, which is still low, but that means that we have to plant 20,000 hectares extra blueberries. So still a way to go. What we wanted to show is in fact that the consumer market is not only growing in Europe. Of course, the biggest blue ball you see is the consumption market in the US. And the three red balls are new consumer areas, Russia, GCC countries, and China. interesting and why we invited you to talk with us is because you have a unique situation and location to grow blueberries. So first of all, if you look to the north of Africa, we see that these countries can produce early and very early blueberries to complete the needs for the European market in the early months. They have also the new access to the GCC countries to supply them. If you look then to the Central Asia, these countries are occurring and they have access to 4 markets: China, Russia, Moscow, GCC, and Europe. So if you look to during the COVID, what became stronger, what was already a quote before COVID, but sourcing changed because retailers want to buy even more close to home than earlier. So they want to buy really as close as possible to home, as far away as needed. Before COVID, our projection was that the consumption will double. So we consume today approximately in 2019 1 million ton, and we assumed it will grow to 2 million ton. So what happened during COVID, and it's interesting, it's really interesting to see the parallel with Kort's presentation and Kort's comment. During COVID, we saw an increase and the numbers are quite equal, around 20-30% in fresh fruit. Frozen was in the UK a growth of 100% year on year, so really steep growth. With the top number I found in Europe was the Netherlands, where the consumption of blueberry increased by 91% compared to last year. So in general, we can say in Europe, consumption of blueberries was growing heavily in fruit in general, but blueberries are really outperforming. These data are based on Nielsen and IRI data in the Netherlands.
All right. Well, changing gears to the ongoing health research, and our access to this comes through a member of our team, our chairman, also happens to be my father, is the chairman of the Health Research Committee. And we asked him for a brief update on the research that's been ongoing now for almost 25 years, supported by the United States High-Bush Blueberry Council, an important reminder of how important it is to develop industry associations that engage in research and generic promotion activities. So in general, just a quick explanation of how this works. What the council does is facilitates research. There's lots of research going on all sorts of foods and all sorts of habits people can develop all the time, just on how to improve our lives, improve our health, and live better, and also reduce the cost to our medical care systems. Oftentimes supporting this research just means providing blueberries. So they actually hold a large inventory of product and provide it. There's a project going on right now over multiple years that requires 1,000 tons of blueberries. And so just getting that product to those research projects is important. Sometimes they also require joint funding with other food inputs that are being looked at. And so we work with doctors, health researchers, dietitians, and then those the information coming from that research eventually ends up in the consumer press. Without active promotion, it gets picked up. So consumers around the world continue to hear new and positive research about the health benefits of blueberries, led by work by the U.S. Council, funded and supported by the countries who also export to the United States and pay assessments. We do a lot of work now in Europe with the UK. If we go to the next slide, we see a lot of work happening around clinical research around humans. So though this project was actually started at Harvard, it became a partnership with East Anglia University in the United Kingdom, because the National Health Service has a large bank of people who are involved in their active day-to-day and week-to-week and year-to-year healthcare services. And so it's easier to actually do clinical research on people. And the focus of the study, the CIRCLES study, and I can't remember what CIRCLES stands for, it's sciencey and very smart, is focused on the health effects of blueberry anthocyanins and metabolic syndrome. Anthocyanins are the pigments and flavonols that make blueberries blue. Metabolic syndrome is a fancy word for people that are very overweight or fat, something that Americans and the British have become very good at becoming. So that work is going on in the UK. It's happened now for a number of years. If we move to the next slide, this was a very large study of people. It was double-blinded and crossover with blueberries versus a placebo. What this means is you have one large group receiving blueberries and not knowing it, and one large group receiving a placebo and not knowing it for an extended period of time. After that period, the groups switch. One receives blueberries and one receives the placebo. One of the things that enabled this study to happen is we did a lot of research on how to create a fake blueberry. We spent as an organization 20 years fighting fake blueberries, and then we suddenly began needing a fake blueberry so people could think they're eating blueberries in the placebo while we do the research. The focus was metabolically challenged subjects, again, a fancy word for people that are very overweight. And we consistently, in this study, measured blood flow, blood pressure, and lots of other health indicators. We have conclusions from this study at this point. So roughly, I believe it's just over 150 grams, 1 cup per day. If we go back real quick to that previous slide, Ronnie, and this is important. Those who consumed the equivalent of 1 cup per day versus half a cup per day, these benefits did not happen at half a cup. It needed to be 1 cup. And I apologize for not knowing that in grams off the top of my head, but I think it's just over 150 grams. There was a notable reduction in risk of cardiovascular disease, over 20%, a reduction in blood pressure, and similar results to those who were taking blood pressure medication, taking pharmaceuticals. The biggest change was around cardiovascular health, but they needed to eat 1 cup a day. Going back to our estimates on actual consumption, 1 cup a day is much higher than 1 kilo per year per capita. So exciting indications of what happens if we move to a cup a day. Also an indication of the sort of messaging that the global industry could move towards. Your daily dose of blue, for example. Blueberries are really the only thing that deliver some of these functional ingredients. Very quickly, other exciting health research happening is on blueberry flavonoids intake, in other words, eating blueberries and flavonoids in blueberries, and its impact on the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. This is an extended long-term study, been going on for a very long time, focused on 2,200 men and women who are just a little bit older than 50, who start without dementia, but who are at risk, genetically predisposed. And some of them have an increased diet high in flavonoids, especially blueberries, others do not. And the big discovery is that those consuming diets high in flavonoids, including blueberries, have the lowest risk of Alzheimer's disease or dementia development. A big standout. And this is for cognitive function with all the aging baby boomers around the world. This is critical information that can help empower not just healthy living, but of course, a healthy habit around eating blueberries and similar products. The last one I'm going to share that's concluded is the health benefits of fresh blueberries on preventing and managing type 2 diabetes. This was an eight-week study in a Veterans Affairs operation and a double-blinded study as well, built around 1 cup of fresh blueberries a day versus placebo. 1 cup of blueberries a day is clinically proven to improve the body's response when struggling with symptoms of type 2 diabetes. There's a significant reduction in total serum triglycerides and improving pancreatic function and insulin regulation. There's also research on preventing the onset of type 2 diabetes and the benefits of blueberries. So 2 more studies. These are all people, not rats, not animals. These are well-conducted, well-managed studies that have been peer-reviewed, all indicating the positive benefits of consuming blueberries. So as we look at this, there's plenty of reasons to eat blueberries for your health. The challenge and the opportunity is to make sure that when consumers finally buy them, and this is my last push, that they're good. And that ties into what Fall Creek's passionate about, is all we have to do is make these blueberries good, accessible, and fairly priced to growers and consumers, and we have lots of room for growth. And that's why we remain so bullish and so passionate about the business and the crop. So thank you.
Thank you, Kort. It's really connected with what Kort is stating. So the reaction of retail on the product and price during COVID. What Kort told us already, it's the same in Europe. The disruption of the supply chain was really one of the difficulties for retailers during COVID. And this, in combination of this, resulted, of course, in empty shelves, which call insufficient inventory. That was their main issue in the first days of the crisis. What we know from blueberries is there are 4 basic conditions to sell blueberries. And the two which were hit during COVID were the availability, because if there is no fruit available, you can't sell it. And the second was soft fruit. Soft and firmness are really, really critical criteria for a consumer to buy more of the blueberries. So different than in the US, we saw in Europe of faster change in SKU management. During the COVID, the shopper clearly went less frequent to the shop, with this result that they bought more toilet paper at once, a lot of bulk toilet paper bought. But in the blueberry sector, they decided pretty fast, most of the big retailers, to upgrade the packaging and develop the 500-gram packaging. So right now, in a lot of retailers in Europe, you find the 500-gram packaging instead of the 150-gram, which gave really a volume boost, because people buy the same once a week, but they buy immediately 500 gram. Reflecting to the 1 cup a day of quart, I believe these are 3 cups you buy at once. Again, because the shopper frequency went down, people wanted to have better fruit, because if you buy once a week, also the supermarket really pushed the barrier for quality and shelf life. So this was really changing dramatically. Nice to see as well, for the retailers as the growers, is that the price didn't went down. So in the beginning, of course, it was very hard to get the product. But in general, over the season in November, they got a price which was 12% higher compared to last year. And yeah, bad news for the consumer, but he paid between 12 and 24 euro, so higher compared to last year. Those two elements resulted in most of the cases in the retail landscape in an increased category growth. A big German retailer told me they had a category growth of 38%, which is quite interesting in a crisis and pandemic period. Yes, Ronnie? Okay. On top, which is nice to see, is that also this COVID created new opportunities. If you are quick and fast, what the online shoppers and shopping channels are, like Amazon Fresh, we saw them popping up and in front of my house quite often. It was not only with shoes this time, but in general, they had a growth in the fresh area between 200 and 400%, depending on the country, which is a serious growth. So we believe Amazon Fresh and Fresh online shopping will be affect us from now. But one of the criteria they have to respect to be successful, it are the same criteria than a retailer. They have to go for, and they will go for, taste and firmness. So they will choose blueberry genetics, which are firmer, and they will not buy soft fruit for this reason, because their transport is even more complex than buying into a supermarket. So in general, we can conclude when we look to the COVID, it didn't slow down the blueberry growth. If we, in the beginning state, the growth will be for consuming in Europe up to 650,000 tons. Given all the parameters we discussed, we believe this is a minimum what we can achieve. So it will not harm the business. It will not slow down, but I think even speed up. What will be different in the future is that consumers and retailers will require better blueberries, so firmer blueberries, better taste, and this will be really also for us crucial to grow the business. So variety selection will be key, even more key than it was before. Ronnie?
So, thank you very much, Hans and Kort, for your presentations. I've got a few questions from some people. Let's start with the first one. What will, and it's you almost start answering already, Hans. What will be the best genetics of varieties in the future?
Yeah, good question. I think there are two answers on that. So I think the genetics will be driven by firmness and taste. Consumers will choose for more tasteful fruit and firmer fruit. Retailers will really secure their supply chain by not allowing soft fruit, because that will kill their market and the growth. And the second thing is, of course, every region has its own chill level. So I think it's really good to see in what area you are to speak to our grower support and to understand what variety can grow in your chill level. So I think that's really crucial to define the right genetics to move on.
Yeah, so that's also one comment that our friends from Tunisia were stating on the chat was there's a big potential to produce blueberries in Tunisia. Actually, there are no hectares of commercial production today. Many exporters of other fruits are interested to develop this production in Tunisia for local, European and GCC markets. South and center of Tunisia have very similar climatic conditions as Agadir in Morocco and can produce early production. So are we considering Tunisia also as a great potential country for the future? Hans, your microphone.
I did the opposite. I just muted when I have to talk, so that's strange. No, I think yes is the answer. That's why we invited, that's why we organized this session. Of course, we have to be in line with all legal requirements, and that will be one of the restrictions and the hurdles we have to take before entering Tunisia. But if you see that we assume that we as industry have to plant 20,000 hectares only to feed Europe, not GCC, not Moscow, but only to feed Europe. We really need a lot of new hectares even planted to feed these markets. So yes is the answer. Legal and government and variety protection is today the hurdle we have to take, but we are willing to do that together with the growers.
Okay, I've got another question for Cord. Cord, what is necessary to increase that your consumption? Because in the presentations there you talked about the consumption will increase. We need to plant so much hectares, but what is necessary to do that increase of the consumption?
Okay, I'd like to help answer that variety question from earlier as well. So the answer is it's multiple things. On a grower level, if you're going to produce blueberries and you're going to contribute effectively to consumption growth, you have to produce the quality that actually arrives to the shelf, to the consumer that they want. And so that includes the firmness that they want, that includes the flavor that they're looking for. Additionally, you have to be able to be cost competitive. So that's execution in the farming and execution in the genetics. We're not going to grow the category with variable quality blueberries. Blueberries of all categories in the produce section are consistently reported by consumers as the most inconsistent fresh fruit and vegetable item that they buy. There's very little consistency in blueberries on the shelves today. That's improving, but the quality experience needs to improve to build consumer confidence in the category. Additionally, pricing is extremely erratic for consumers at retail. This isn't just solved by growers and marketers. This is also solved by retailers. We need to see more consistent pricing to consumers. The last thing that needs to continue is the health message. The benefit of the health message getting out is that it gets blueberries in people's minds. The health message and the health research is not what pushes most people to continue eating blueberries as a habit, but it's what helps people establish the habit. Then they need to have two positive experiences. They need to feel that they're paying a reasonable price for the fruit, and they need to feel they're getting good quality. So what does that mean for a producer? It means you have to really focus on unit cost and competitiveness. Unit cost is not all about driving cost out. It's all about driving yields up and efficiencies in and quality coming out of your system. And I want to help on that genetics question as well. The right answer on what are the best genetics, as Hans said, the most site-specific adapted to your region that you can say with confidence will grow well where you are, that then you can execute on a good management system to grow and optimize yield and harvest efficiency. And then lastly, that deliver the quality in alignment with what the market wants. Where will these genetics come from? They will come from breeding programs, not one. They will come from multiple breeding programs. This is why Fall Creek has its own breeding program at multiple chill levels, and it's why we work with more than 25 other breeding programs around the world to bring in the best genetics that we can curate for the industry. This isn't about who has the best genetics. That's not the discussion. It's about where good genetics can come from and how we can identify what are the best varieties for these different regions. We need to remove ego and focus on quality.
Okay, thanks, Claude. So we have 4 more questions, and then I propose that the rest of the questions we will answer by email afterwards. What will be the percentage of local versus imported fruit in Europe?
Ooh. That's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, I can say today it's around 20% quart. And if I see that, it depends on, of course, of the definition of import.
What's local? What's
Yeah.
local now?
Yeah, if you see today we consider import as we call it the rest of the world. This is South Africa plus South America, but we consider more and more Africa as no import but local. Is Morocco and North Africa import? So it's Central Asia import. It's becoming a global supply. I think we better have to discuss this country by country, but in global you can see that if the South African volume will stay around the 20% is an assumption. So Peru is growing heavily, but also consumption is growing rapidly. So I believe it. What?
I agree with all of that. I would add some more factors. If you assume that local is a truck, in the case of Europe, the farthest truck to Europe being from Morocco with a short boat ride, and imported is a boat. There's strong evidence now, if you include North Africa, that the European continent could supply a strong, in volume, I'm not talking a little bit of fruit, I'm talking commercial volume, from the very end of January, early February, all the way through early September, a strong truck-based supply program. From today, it's southern Morocco starting there, and in the future, similar places. Perhaps Tunisia is one of those places. I haven't spent enough time in Tunisia to have an informed answer, but it sounds compelling. And going into northern Morocco, Spain, southern Italy, all those things, the spring period. And then in the summer, it disperses because you can grow northern high bush in so many different parts of northern and eastern Europe. That September to December period will remain, in my opinion, physiologically more competitive for counter-seasonal suppliers with maritime shipments. Boat shipping is generally on a per unit basis not more expensive than 1 or 2 day trucking. And blueberries, unlike the other berries, can go on a boat. They can do 8 to 10, 15 with the right genetics, 20, 30 days. We have some varieties in our program that taste better after 30 days of storage than the day you pick them. That's the direction of the genetics. The other answer I would emphasize is in the summer in Europe, one of the questions we don't have a good answer to is how important will summer local for local supply, true local, down the street local, or within a few hours truck ride local in high cost Western Europe, how big will that be versus how big will larger, more consolidated, cost competitive operations in Eastern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe become? I don't think we have a great answer for that today. And I think long-term, the answer actually gets answered by technology and genetics. Today, it's still difficult to deliver on quality by machine harvesting fresh, even in the best northern high bush varieties that are better adapted to machine harvesting. As we get the genetics dialed in, and this is coming, and you bring in some of these new harvest technologies together with new field designs in the summer months, just for northern high bush, because the crop is so much more concentrated. I think we may see a move towards more local for local supply in the summer. That said, those same advantages still move to the folks who have cheaper water, land, and labor. So I think that one's a more finite debate, and that's really a 6 to 8 week supply period, but it's a period that affects a lot of people, including people on this call. So that's actually one to watch. And it's why staying in front of the genetics curve and the technology curve and the management curve is so important.
So what we see in Northern High Bush, we see that I got a message from Kosovo, so they start already picking blueberries today. So it's
early Duke.
It's not June yet, and we have more countries that start in June. That also relates to the next question: in which months do you see the gaps in supply of Europe, or let's say produce and supply in Europe?
I mean, Hans, I'll let you answer, but I have my answer.
Thank you. Yeah, like I stated, after September until February today, it's sharp because then we have to in Europe it will be sharp. But if you see that the results in Agadir and even like you hear the climate in Tunisia, Egypt, they can grow in the early months also fruit. So it will be I think after September till December might be challenging or weaker. But then, of course, you have other continents who will fill this in. But with the new genetics, we see them coming earlier, but they are not planted yet. So the first 3 years, there will be little fruit in that window. Cor?
Yeah, I would say so. It is absolutely correct that over the next, certainly the next 5 and probably over the next 10 years in the global supply curve, be it Europe or North America or even what's happening in Asia, we will continue to see periods of lower relative supply and higher relative supply. But the days of extreme differences between highs and lows, the mountains and the valleys, those are going away, and they're going to go from mountains and valleys to hills and ditches. And so that example of that June window, that is for a long time has been this transitional period where volume availability is increasing, quality is quite good in a lot of the southern high bush supply in North America and Europe in the months of April and May. But then the volume starts to drop off, quality drops off, and there's this gap historically between traditional high chill growing regions and traditional low chill growing regions. And that imbalance has created a mini dip. And this has happened in the US, now it's happening in Europe. There's a jump to identify places to fill the June gap. My emphasis would be that June gap will go away, just like the January, February local supply gap will go away. There's actually not a supply gap in January, February, there's a quality gap in January, February. A lot of the maritime shipment from the Southern Hemisphere is just not very good quality today. But if you're entering the blueberry business, and I want to emphasize this a lot, because remember, we sell plants and genetics, and we know that we have an interest in you guys planting lots of blueberries. But and that's great for our business. The problem is if it's not good for you, it's not good for us. So the fact is, if you're going to start in the blueberry business, especially now, first, recognize this is a more mature industry today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. There used to be a lot of margin available to make terrible mistakes and still make money. That margin isn't there anymore. Is it a competitive, compelling business relative to other crops? Absolutely. Do we believe it has a more bright future than most other products? Yes. That being said, it's a business. So don't build your business around just finding that window. If there is an opportunity in the global economy, and this is, I know I'm an American talking about capitalism, but if an opportunity exists and there's a window, the window will be closed. That's what happens. People run to the opportunity, they make the investments, the dynamics change. So if you have a window of opportunity, use that to help finance your return on investment, to pay for your investment. But focus on the assumption that over time, pricing may go from this or this to this. Volumes will stabilize. Pricing will stabilize. Returns will become more predictable, but less extravagant. What will also happen is the market will grow as that stabilization happens. What do you have to have? The great quality and a competitive per unit cost. So focus on being in an extended offering, not a short window. How about this? If you plant, using the June or early July example in Duke, if you just plant a huge amount of Duke, you have to have all your labor built around a 2-week period. You have to have your packing house built around a 2-week period. You create operational inefficiencies that add cost to your system. That reason alone, from an operational perspective, is a reason to have a more extended offering. So include a window strategy in your short to medium term business plan, but focus on extended supply, operational efficiencies, and exceptional quality in your business plan for the long term. That's a long answer, but that's an important one.
Thanks, Cord. Hans, question for you. From Blanca. What about post-COVID reaction or uncertain times? Would consumers move to cheaper categories or commodities?
In fact, I have to ask Blanca what she thinks about it. So yeah, I think it's very hard to predict this one. So I think what we see happening right now is indeed they move to bigger pack sizes, which is good. The habit of eating more blueberries is good. Of course, price-wise, we have to see if what the place this takes in the life of people and how important they see this. So for me, this is quite hard to predict. And I think we have to monitor closely the coming months what the behavior will be.
We have some early data in the United States on this, and it's not conclusive, but I will share this at the risk of being wrong. So this may be incorrect, but in the United States, we do have a large number of people whose incomes have reduced. Simple as that. We're going to have 50 to 70 million people unemployed in my country for a period of time here. And we don't have a strong social safety net like Europe does, and in some ways more like some of the other countries, people that are here in this call. The folks who have disrupted incomes are going to be very cautious. The folks who continue to have income are spending it on less things because there's fewer things to buy and they're more cautious. But people are clearly, if they still have stable incomes, are actually spending more on the food they eat during this time. And that trend seems to be established now. If you have a steady income, you're going to spend more of your money on the food and the quality of food you eat. That appears to be a trend. If you have a disrupted income, you're going to become much more value focused. But one thing has also occurred. The frozen category has grown significantly. And one of the drivers for that frozen growth is lower income people who traditionally do not buy blueberries are buying frozen blueberries right now. And so we may actually increase market penetration and share of stomach. We've been at 48% market penetration, moving around there for 10 years. Our actual total family and household market penetration in the United States has not grown. Our growth has been the same people eating more blueberries. So if we can increase market penetration through this frozen category, because it's what people can afford, and they can get through this time, we may have new habits. So that's it remains to be seen. Right now, generally, it looks like existing blueberry consumers with undisrupted or less disrupted incomes are going to buy more blueberries. That appears to be the trend, especially if they can get larger pack sizes because they're going to go shopping less. We want to sell them more volume. We want to keep that space in the refrigerator filled with blueberries. But also, we may get new consumers on the frozen side who eventually trade up to fresh. But Blanca, I think that's the sort of question I wonder what we'll have an answer to in the next 1 to 2 years, because new habits and norms are being formed.
Yeah, but that's interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting insight.
Yeah, I know. 2 months of data is not 2 years of data, right? So we'll see where it goes.
All right.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. I'm stopped sharing my screen now. So if somebody has more questions, please send us an email. We have a team of people who can answer all your questions.